I thought that I should answer this question because basically what came to me, and we won't say where this came from, but um, what came to me was a kind of a logos oriented list of rational statements trying to understand what Dr. Jung's oeuvre was about. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this with you. Hopefully, it'll uh, keep the originator of this um, anonymous, but um, because while I think it's a good go, what I was requested to do was to go through this and tell tell me where the originator had gone wrong. And I said, wow, you didn't ask for much because basically I would have had to write the collected works over again in order to fully respond to this. So I thought what I would do is just present the points and talk about them and, um, see what others think also. And that should pretty much address it. Um, and uh, So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen here so that you can see what these points are. Um, so that's not the right button. This is the right button. Okay, so you should be seeing a bunch of pros there. I'm going to start going down this list, and I'll have to stop every 5 minutes or so and check back and see if we have anybody waiting to get in to the panel. Okay, so point one, Dr. C.G. Jung thinks human beings are aware of their world through ego and unaware about their own being in certain areas that he calls personal unconscious. He also had dreams before World War I, so he started thinking there is an intelligence in the universe and it tries to communicate to humans, and he called it the collective unconscious. Unconscious was used because we do not have access to its contents in a conscious way. All right. Well, that's certainly a stab at it. The way I think of it is that uh, the ego is consciousness, and everything that is unconscious is not ego. Okay. Um, and uh, I wouldn't say that he calls it personal unconscious per se. I mean, he did differentiate personal unconscious from collective unconscious in the sense that he talked about a God image that's in each one of us, and he talked about the God image of a creator, let's say. Um, which is part of the collective unconscious. But late in his life, he basically said that the unconscious um, is God. And let me just, I have read this paragraph many times, but there's one paragraph where he summed it up. In his letter, I'm looking at um, The New God Image by Edward Edinger, page 187, and it's paragraph 1664 in volume 18 of the collected works. And it's about a 10-page long letter to the Reverend David Cox. And let me just let one other person here in. Okay, so it's about a 10-page letter, but there's one paragraph that sums it all up. He says, although all this sounds as if it were a sort of theological speculation, it is in reality modern man's perplexity expressed in symbolic terms. It is the problem I so often had to deal with in treating the neuroses of intelligent patients. It can be expressed in a more scientific, psychological manner. For instance, instead of using the term God, you say unconscious. Instead of Christ, self. Instead of incarnation, integration of the unconscious. Instead of salvation or redemption, individuation. Instead of crucifixion or sacrifice on the cross, realization of the four functions or of wholeness. I think it is no disadvantage to religious tradition if we can see how far it coincides with psychological experiences. On the contrary, it seems to me a most welcome aid in understanding religious traditions. So that's basically what he was saying. Let me share that again now because let's see. I just wanted to check and see who wasn't in here. Okay, so we're unaware of things in the max. I mean, your body, your unconscious tells your heart to beat 72 times a minute, your lungs to breathe 12 times a minute, every cell in your body to reproduce once every 7 years. There's a lot of stuff going on, not to mention things like digestion and so on. So there's plenty going on in your body that's unconscious. And your ego sort of floats on the surface of that. And so, it might be a little bit too easy to or too facile to say that it's God per se, but anyway, let me just mention, where did I put it now? Yes, I have a new bookshelf next to me, so that I can show things.
That's nice.
Right. Okay. So I mentioned this book last week, The Radiant Sutras, and it's really a book that I can't even describe properly. Okay. It's 112 gateways to the yoga of wonder and delight. But Lauren Roche, who's the writer of this book, has a wonderful way of describing it in the prelude to the book, where he's talking about the language of love. And this is about the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra. Is said as a conversation between the goddess, who is the creative power of the universe, and the god, who is the consciousness that permeates everywhere. For short, they call each other Devi and Bhairava, or Shakti and Shiva. They are lovers and inseparable partners, and one of their favorite places of dwelling is in the human heart. And so it's really that duality, which Einstein described as E equals mc squared. That's the way I read this. And so basically, you can call it God or however you want to call it. I'll just read one of the verses here to give you a better sense. This is verses 10 through 12 of this sutra. It says, elaborate rituals and garish images may be useful in meditation when your mind is whirling with thoughts of sex, money, and power, wandering like an elephant in the heat. Go ahead and use these tools, yet know, beating drums and blaring trumpets cannot summon the one who is already present. I am not a collection of incantations known only to experts. I am not a ladder to be climbed, a sequence for piercing energy centers in your body. I am not to be found at the end of a long road. I am right here. And so, you either feel the power of the ineffable in you or you don't. If you don't, then you're unconscious of it, I suppose. That would be a fair way of saying it. But
Could I share a personal
yeah,
experience?
please, Nancy, go ahead.
So last summer, I had an experience called the arising of the divine feminine, and that has continued to develop until fairly recently. I had an experience of the divine feminine living me and tending to me. I had some issues with my ears, and I was aware of that energy living me. And I went to my ears that were in discomfort, and that energy went to my ears and healed them. And now I'm able to have this interface between this Shakti
Yeah.
energy. And then I had a second experience where I was in a waking vision, but it was like a lucid dream. And I was in the deep depths of an ocean, very dark and black. And it was eternal, and it was totally peaceful. And it was an essence. And between that deep, quiet, eternal place and this new, what I'm calling Shakti place, I think there's that interplay of Shakti and Shiva going on. And it's been an incredible healing, integrative experience, which continues to unfold.
Right, consciousness and energy. And I'm taking this as a step beyond rationality and irrationality, a step beyond logos and eros, or logos and life. This is really, to me, when I read this, I said, wow, this is really the essence of what Dr. Jung was talking about too. And I'm pretty sure he was aware of this. Now, Dan Pohl, who's here and has been an executive producer of this channel for a couple of years, asks a question, and I certainly want to answer it, Dan. And he says, is there information in the collective unconscious that are beyond the reach of the natural sciences? And I would say to that, absolutely. Okay, because the natural sciences can only reach what's in the faces, and psychology doesn't actually deal with that. Psychology actually deals with the energy side, the eros side, the life side. As I've often said, that everything in the room around you is, an emanation from the logos. Okay, it's perfect. You wouldn't have bought it. You wouldn't have brought it into your life if it wasn't useful to you. And it has to be perfect, or you wouldn't have bought it. Whether it's a pen or your cell phone or a book, you buy these things because you think that you can use them in your life, and they have to be done essentially perfectly, or you wouldn't have bought it. You wouldn't buy a defective pen or a defective iPhone. But life isn't in them. And I have shelves of books here, and those are all stored knowledge, but they're material. They're just things, unless somebody picks the book up, regardless of what book it is. I mean, I've been known to refer to the Bible, but any book that you pick up has stored energy in it, okay, stored life force that tells you something to your consciousness. And but it doesn't do anything on the shelf. It's just dead matter. It's just matter. And so remember, E equals mc squared, which is energy equals matter times the speed of light squared. And so in order to get energy out of the logos, you have to put life into it. There has to be life in it. And so this is this interplay that Lauren Roche is talking about in his book of the interplay between energy and consciousness.
And that's why I really enjoy a writer or poet reciting their poem rather than reading, or even if a third person is reciting it, because then they put their own soul and energy into it.
Right.
And just in response to Nancy, thank you for sharing that. I very often experience this first instant after sleep is over, that awakening moment before I remember my name and form. So as our eyes open and we have forgotten who we are or where we are, but we open our eyes to the world, that very short period of time, it's pure consciousness. And in Sanskrit, they say as soon as we remember nama, rupa, which means name and form, then we get distinct from consciousness, where we actually become the limited ego. So thank you for sharing that with me. And I think a lot of children, before they become aware that they're called human beings and their name is such and such, they are in that pure conscious period.
Yeah. They're in pure consciousness, but they haven't differentiated themselves. And so that's what the ego is. The ego emerges out of this pure consciousness state, which is the self or God or what have you, whether it's the personal self or the huge self. I mean, it's not a question of going and finding it, right? It's all right here. I mean, here's another verse. This is verse number 160, and I'm reading from the Radiant Sutras. And it is, friends, relatives, neighbors, people who abide in your village, city, country, be not concerned with their attitudes toward these teachings. Everyone is discovering the intimate universe in their own way. This nectar is here within every breath, every desire, every transition from waking to sleeping and sleeping to waking. Once you have set out on the path of intimacy with the immortal essence of life, never turn back on it, my shining one. Never turn away. Though every moment be surprising, revelatory, unrecognizable, and full of wonder, continue to cherish each breath. Live in gratitude for the ambrosia we imbibe in each turning, out breath to in breath, into out breath. And I mean, there's just so many beautiful things in this book. I can't say enough good things about it. I wish I had found it 50 years ago. But it's the essence of it. It's, you know, you can have consciousness. I mean, all these books are consciousness, and they can bring consciousness, but they're stored consciousness. And so until you bring eros or energy to them, there's nothing alive about them. That's my view. And so we have to revise our way of thinking about the world, it seems to me. And I've been doing that all of my life. And so when I got this book 2 weeks ago, I started to, I first said, geez, I want my wife to look at this. Isn't this a wonderful thing? And so I couldn't get her to pay attention to it because it was Buddha's birthday weekend. And so, it's the day that Buddha was born, the day he died, and the day he was enlightened all falls on one day, June 5th. And so I couldn't get her attention. So finally, I just ordered another copy from Amazon. I had it gift wrapped and I had a gift tag put in it saying, hi, lover, you're going to want your own copy of this. All my love, Skip, and had Amazon mail it to her, or send it to her. So she got it the next day, and she said, oh, wow. She said, these are the sutras that the Tibetan Buddhist lamas always promise to teach, but never do. Okay, because they always hold it out as a carrot that you can somehow get to, you can rise to, but they never actually teach you. And and so anyway, she changed her tune about it right brilliantly. So let's see if we can get on through the other half of this first paragraph and then see how we do here. All right, so I'm going to give you the paragraphs back again. So he calls the personal unconscious. Let's see. So he also had dreams before World War I. So he started thinking there is an intelligence in the universe. Well, it's not exactly an intelligence in the universe. It's not what the common vernacular would call the intelligence in the universe. It's actually the combination of everyone's unconscious manifesting in a way that we start to see it. And so some people who are attuned to the collective then can pick up on it. So in Dr. Jung's case, he was picking up on it in dreams and in visions that he was having, and they were quite intense visions lasting an hour or two. And they were about the onset of World War I. And so what he said about it was that on August 1st, 1914, he was the happiest man on earth. That was the first day of the Guns of August, World War I. And he was the happiest man alive because then he knew that he wasn't psychotic, that he wasn't crazy, that he was actually just tuned into the collective and was hearing what everyone else was hearing more or less in some way. I mean, not that everybody has visions, but I certainly do occasionally, and I think a lot of people do. And so he was realizing that the war was coming. It's like, all right, the collective unconscious. Right now, we have Black Lives Matter saying, "Look, pay attention to us. White people, pay attention to us, because here's what you've done to us over the last 40 years." And if we don't pay attention to that, then things are not going to be good. And so what the death of George Floyd did was the straw that broke the camel's back. It can't stay unconscious anymore. It had to come out from the Black community that some changes have to be made. This can't go on like this. And I think, a lot of people in this country feel that way now. I mean, we obviously can't have people lynching people in California and that sort of thing. It's ridiculous. Let's see. Dan C. says one of the books that influenced him the most was Jonathan Livingston Seagull. I think there are a few of us that have been influenced by Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It's a very good book. And so anyway, I'm not quite sure what you mean, Dan, when you say it was like that for you, wasn't it? Well, it was certainly an influential book, yes, of many. Okay, so going back to this paragraph, though, I don't think he's thinking of an intelligence in the universe. I think he's thinking of God, okay? And all of our intellects combined make up God. And maybe there's many gods. I mean, maybe there's the God of the Boy Scout troop and the God of your local community and so on. And each of them manifests in different ways. And occasionally you see what's happening. So there's the collective unconscious of the American Black community that's saying, wait a minute, we can't take this anymore. This is not right, and we have to bring it to the attention of our fellow Americans who happen to be white, and we have to bring it to the attention of our government. This is why one of the 5 things that were guaranteed in the First Amendment of the Constitution is the right of assembly. And that's the 45 most important words probably in human history, which is protection of the religion 2 ways, the protection of the right of speech, the protection of the right of the press, freedom of the press, and the freedom of assembly. Because if something's blowing up in the unconscious of the community, if you can't see it, ultimately it can come out and you can have a civil war. But if it can come out and people can get the attention of the government for a redress of their grievances, maybe you can prevent the violence. That's the idea of it. And so, that's exactly what's happening now. And so it's not the intelligence in the universe, it's just the reality of the way people are thinking in the universe. And it tries to communicate to humans, and he called it the collective unconscious. Well, yes, it does communicate to humans. And right now we have that manifestation happening, but it's not a thinking being, okay? And it's not thinking that it's going to communicate. It does communicate. It is God, okay? And so unconscious was used because we do not have access to its contents in a conscious way. Yeah, okay. So I hope that's helpful. Anybody else have any more comments about this first point in this list?
I'd like to say something about the personal unconscious and see what you think.
Okay.
For me, as I've matured with my spirituality, there are aspects of the personal unconscious, the shadow, the elements I've rejected in myself, both good and both dark and light aspects, that become more aware. For I might find myself jealous of somebody. And so I can go to that jealous aspect and bring consciousness to that. And for me, the love of God to that, and see a shift in the energy, a shift in my awareness with that jealousy. And in one particular case, as I worked with it, I realized I was not accepting my own competence, my own gold, so to speak, something I had rejected. And as soon as I opened to accept the good of the person I am, that jealousy energy faded back. So there seems to be a way in which the ego can interact with the personal unconscious when aware of certain feelings and attitudes.
Well, and I think that's what you've learned to do as a spiritual director, and I think that that's what all the religions actually endeavor to do, which is to sort of reorient, energies that might not be terribly positive, but which by evolution, the religions have learned a way to channel that energy. Okay. And it's not necessarily conscious. I mean, Paul Vanderklay was hugely surprised when I said that he was in the same business as Jordan Peterson. I mean, because he was commenting on Jordan Peterson. I said, wait a minute, Paul, you're in the same business. That's what you do. And I think he's starting to get his mind around that, actually. But let's see, I can pull up the.
Skip, I'll
go ahead. Go ahead, Gray.
To
yeah,
that.
please.
You said something about, and you were talking about whether this was a conscious or an unconscious process. And I think for most of us, we've started to come to grips with the interaction with this thing has to be more of an unconscious process, right? That
it is, yeah.
That it's more of a sensory. It's more of a sensory process than it is an existential process. And the more things that you can connect back, the sutras recently for you, the Psalms recently for me. I just found a very old Psalm book, according to the Septuagint, right? I mean, it just and you chant these things, or like you do with the sutras, or with the, and that gives you a sensory movement. And I think this is kind of where biology comes back in and ecology comes back in, because we're reconnecting to a sacred environment, or even by Jung, an environment that reconnects us back to something else. And I think that I think a lot of people are finding, a balance here.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's basically the religions sort of naturally evolved ways of making that connection up, and they worked on it for thousands of years. And so now their rituals have it in very refined form in every religion. And so it's so refined that it becomes split off from us. We no longer know what's happening. We can't see it. And so we have to urge people to go back and take a look again at the religions maybe they were brought up in, whatever they are, and say, okay, now what do you feel? I mean, as you rightly said, Gray, it's a matter of feeling, right? It's a matter of emotion, isn't it? That you have to see that connection. And I'm sure Nancy, as a spiritual director, is trying to get people to feel the connection between their life, as petty as it might seem, whatever their petty little life is, and God, which is this immensity that it encompasses the whole universe. And that connection has to be made. And we've lost the connection because because of the scientific method, which said it has to be physically in front of me. It has to be something I can hold in my hand and prove that it's here and this is what it says, or it's not real. Well, it is real.
And I mean, and I'll ask, you know, and this is again, I'll also say, and this is the science part of me coming out, it's a misapplication of the scientific method. And you and I have talked about this historically, right, with reductionism and the, you know, or the idea that because we've solved so many things with science, that science is for solving, right? And that's an interpretation that I think comes from a lot of physics and a lot of physics to math, because we've been able to solve so much with that reductionistic method of building, of breaking down and building up.
Right. Sandy would like to get a word in edgeways. So Sandy, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. There's this movement called neuropsychoanalysis.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who's in charge of it, his name is Mark Soames, and he likes to kind of think of himself as like your sort of modern day, you know, Freud, where he's analyzing all the MRIs and he's gone through Freud's work with a fine-tooth comb. And he sort of like has flipped Freud's idea like upside down, where the id is unconscious and the ego is conscious. So somehow he like has interpreted like the inverse, and it really makes a whole lot of sense with this neuropsychoanalytic movement, which is, you could say there's more evidence in that, but how it works is that the id, which is the primitive, you know, body-based animalistic self, is actually what's conscious, but conscious at a different level. And it's the ego that's actually unconscious, that's constantly defending and trying to adapt and trying to like, you know, ward off anxieties and things like that, and isn't aware of its own mechanism. So we've just found that really super interesting, because you would think that the id is unconscious, but really it also makes sense that the id is conscious, but in a way like has a mind of its own, you know, kind of thing.
Well, as soon as these guys can put electrodes on my head or any which way they want to, and see on a screen one of my dreams, then I'll think that they're getting somewhere. But until they do, you know, they're just, you know, they're trying to solve for X, which is to hold all the variables stable, except for one variable. That's the scientific method. Okay, to say, okay, we're going to solve for X. So everything, we're not going to look at any of the variables. But Dr. Jung's point was, I think, that, you know, that's where it's happening in the variables. And so you can't solve for X, right? In other words, it's a multivariant question, however you look at it. And the issue with Freud was that he was a materialist, and therefore he was trying to reduce things down to materialism, and it doesn't explain reality. Okay,
but he said the unconscious, which is definitely, the unconscious is nothing material.
Well, okay, he identified that there is an unconscious and the dreams are the way to the unconscious. That was his great contribution. But then he interpreted dreams as being a sensor to hold things back. And if my understanding is correct, my understanding is the unconscious through dreams and visions is trying to give you a message that you need to know. And when I look at my own
the unconscious wants to process and metabolize and give information, sure, it's called condensation. That's in line with what Freud says and what Jung says. And there's no evidence that Jung is right, and there's no evidence that Freud or other people are right or wrong either. So,
well, they're all right and they're all wrong. Okay. Yeah. Okay, because we're 100 years past them, right? And so, and we've all learned from them. And so the only thing we can do here is not establish who's right or wrong. This isn't litigation about that.
really?
It's for us. Well, no, it's not. I mean, I'm not trying to litigate it. I'm trying to present what I think is Carl Jung's perspective, because that's what the whole purpose of my channel is. But that doesn't mean that I say that he is inevitably right.
I was only bringing up the terms conscious, unconscious, and you sure get activated when you hear the word Freud, I've noticed.
Well, okay. I mean, I like old Sigmund. I read Irving Stone's book about him. And I'm sympathetic with the way his life went, right? And
I'm not listening. I'm just was talking about.
Well, look.
I want to say something if it's okay.
Jane, go ahead.
So what I found is like people are very different. Like, for example, my husband and me, like we read different books. Like some of the book I read, I really connect to. Like he liked Untethered Soul, which I bought because it's on New York bestseller on sport. When I read few first chapters, doesn't connect to it at all. Then one day he saw the book. He's like, "Oh my God, this is really the book." He's really, and I later on I found, I'm a thinker. He's a feeler, and then the Untethered Soul writer is the same type of person as him. So he understands the world exact the way he is. So when he read that book, it makes all the sense to him. But I'm totally different. So I read book, it doesn't say anything to me at all. So I think maybe Carl Jung and what the other guy's name?
Freud, Freud.
Yeah. Maybe there are two types of people in the world, because some people are like Carl Jung, I think more spiritual, and Freud is more like animalistic in my understanding. I read his biography. I don't really study a lot about him, but I mean, people are so different. So it's very hard to say who is right, who is wrong. So, and there always be different people have different way of understanding the world. There are more people, always people more spiritual, always people more like primary, like it's different. That's what I try to say. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to hop in on the interesting thing about biology is there is no right. And I think that's, when you're talking about biological systems, living things, there has to be a both. And I think that speaks to what a lot of people have said. There has to be a little bit of Freud, there has to be a little bit of Jung, and where you apply, how you apply, what you're drawn to, the constant motion towards understanding, seems to be a little bit more of the thing. And I think, it's obvious that both men were trying to understand whatever the thing is. I think what we've all found though is you've got to do the thing, right? I mean, you've got to engage in the process of understanding whether it's ego, shadow, ego, id, to whatever it is. You've got to be able to work that out in yourself to push yourself to do something a little bit more concrete for you. Anyway, you can't do right and wrong biology, right? So it's all on a bell curve. Got to be.
May I say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Idris.
I came across this information that on the 13-hour, I'm sorry, not 13-hour, on the ship journey together of Freud and Dr. Jung, Dr. Jung told Freud his dream, and Freud told him his dream, but Freud did not give permission for Dr. Jung to interpret his dream. And Dr. Jung said that I want to keep my position as a teacher and I don't allow you to interpret it. And in one of his letters, immediate letters after that journey, Dr. Jung had written that he found it surprising that for Freud, his power was more important than truth, that he wanted to maintain that position rather than go dig deep into it. The same person who was a university lecturer giving this information also presented saying that although Myers-Briggs brought this judging and perceiving much later than Freud and Jung, but Freud, according to this university lecturer, was a judging person, so he would close the books on something. But Dr. Jung was more of a perceiving person, and he would not just stop at one judgment and keep digging and go further and further, explore more and more aspects and also like deeper parts of any information. I don't know how far it's true and if you can relate to it.
Let's understand the purpose of what we're doing here. We're all evolving, okay, in terms of every one of us is evolving in terms of our own understanding of these things. And so I certainly am not here saying that any one given thing of that Carl Jung said is right. And I certainly am saying that there are plenty of things that Dr. Freud said that were right. But you know, they're both dead men now. Okay, they're dead. And so we have to, by reflecting on it, that's the point of developing our own psyches. By reflecting on it, we try to understand a little better for ourselves, to know ourselves, whatever. And so Sandy makes this comment, I am simply curious about whoever invented the term unconscious, and I don't believe I exhibit a bias. And you know, that's fine to be curious about that, Sandy. But I'm not sure that either one of them invented the term. I think it probably existed maybe centuries before Freud and Jung came along, and they you know, I think William Blake may have used that term, and Eugen Bleuler and others may have used it as well. So, I mean, and I don't know that they did. I can't say, and so I don't feel it's very important who invented it. I think it's important to understand what it is we're talking about when we're.
I believe we all use different metaphors.
Sure.
You know, the personality types is just sort of a way of helping to understand how to talk other people's language. But we're all struggling to understand the same thing.
Precisely.
And I find the metaphors that certain people use really, really luminous, and others just fall flat for me. And so I think it's helpful to have a big variety of ways of approaching this subject.
Well, with the whole of conscious, unconscious, in terms of the analytic psychology and the psychoanalytic field, not the current medical field of what's conscious, unconscious, right? I mean, there's so many different terminologies. So I was trying really hard to explain this really interesting point that I'm really fascinated by in terms of the conscious id, and was eager to get y'all to understand that, but that's okay.
Well, okay, so what is
I
it?
think what we're seeing in the culture at large, the Trump phenomenon, is the conscious id. Is it not? I mean, these really base, primitive emotions that are coming out into consciousness
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean,
I really enjoyed the notion that she made about the reverse of Freud. I mean, with the it. I mean, I think that's a lot of what's come up in the Jungian community about shadow and why that, you know, and I think it speaks to that. And even in cybernetics, you know, you're talking about these processes that have their own points of view, right? And in your affective neuroscience is another. I mean, these emotions, and you can see it, right? I mean, these, you know, one of the things that the talking points of the right, even you know, right conservative thinkers that you respect, they always want to show you the statistical data, and you're like, it is not a rational argument. You know, this is, we're not dealing with, you know, and that's not to say that the argument of that the left is pushing is not rational, but the emotion of this thing is not going to be statistically explained away, right?
right.
Because you're having to deal with, you are dealing with the collective. Now, again, like you can argue whether that should be identity based or politically based or like there are different ways to argue it. And I think we better get off the identity train as fast as we can, but you can't deny its power, right? And that it has a point of view.
Yeah, and that it has a point of view. It has its own consciousness. The unconscious has its own consciousness, its own way of thinking about you. Okay, in other words, if you think in terms of individuation, if you think of an oak tree, if you stop a branch from growing because you want a higher wire cable to go through that place where that branch is, and you cut it off, the oak tree will unconsciously, or maybe it's conscious in a certain way, but it will unconsciously decide where it's going to put the energy that was going into that branch. And, you know, this is very simply the idea of you know, the Reverend Mother in The Sound of Music, who says to Maria, when God closes a door, he opens a window, right? And so that unconscious something, we don't have to define it per se, or we don't have to give it a name, but it is it is the kind of consciousness that's being talked about in the Radiant Sutras. That consciousness looks for a way to express. And what our psyche is always trying to do is trying to make us whole, make us become the most complete human being we can become. Okay, and so an oak tree is always trying to become an oak tree. It's not trying to become a sea urchin. Okay, and so our psyche is always trying to make us a human being one way or another. And as we discuss these things, you know, there's no telling that any one way of thinking about it is right. Dr. Edinger said himself that, you know, when at the end of the day, you don't find many Jungians. He says, I think that the unconscious throws up as many psychologies as it needs to express itself. Okay. And that can be Freud psychology, it can be Adler psychology, it can be many other psychologies. And so all of these different people and different interactions that they've had are causing different psychologies to manifest. And as Edinger says, as many as are needed do emerge. And then when we get to the big collective unconscious, the collective unconscious of at least nation state level, but at humanity level, then ultimately at some point in the future, maybe it's 10,000 years or 100,000 years from now, maybe more, human beings will think about these things in a completely different way. But because we have all worked through it, okay, because we've all discussed it, I don't know if that's useful, but anyway, I wanted to share this quote because I happen to have it here. The citation is wrong here. It's not volume 10, volume 11. It's volume 10 of the collected works, Civilization in Transition. And here's what Jung says. For thousands of years, the mind of man is worried about the sick soul, because perhaps even earlier than it did about the sick body. The propitiation of gods, the perils of the soul and its salvation, these are not yesterday's problems. Religions are naturally evolved psychotherapeutic systems in the truest sense of the word and on the grandest scale. They express the whole range of the psychic problem in mighty images. They are the avowal and the recognition of the soul, and at the same time, the revelation of the soul's nature. And so to me, that really is a great summation point, okay, that we're trying to have a reconnection in that dance between energy and mass, okay, in the dance between that Einstein put a formula to, but which applies to us in every minute of the day. We're trying to understand how we fit into that. And religions developed ways of accomplishing that and giving people the energy to live their lives. I mean, why do people go to psychotherapists? They go to them because they're depressed or they're upset about something, right? And how do you get out of a depression? If you're going to do it naturally, you're going to do it because somebody said something to you that gives you the energy to go on in your life, that frees you to go on. And so that's what churches have traditionally done. That's why I've always said that, I used to feel better when I'd go to church. And I didn't understand why. And unfortunately, I didn't have anybody like me around to tell me, yeah, that's what it's supposed to do, Skip. That's what it is doing for you, So unfortunately, the theologians don't understand this. Okay, so the next point. Jung said people should know what good and what evil they have and try not to hide their own evil from their own conscious mind. This he called the shadow, the part of our evil that we have forgotten intentionally or unintentionally. Right. I mean, what Dr. Edinger said is that the way to address it is to reflect upon it. If you bring something into consciousness, the evil side of yourself, then you can do something about it, or you can reflect on it and it can change you. If it's unconscious, it's just going to change you in ways that might not be helpful. It might make you into an alcoholic or something. So it's better if you reflect on it and decide, well, that's not probably a very productive way of being in the world. Any comments on this? I mean, the shadow, I mean, if I look at my shelves of books, those are all in my shadow too, because they're not energy, they're stored knowledge. I'm not using them right this minute. I have them here. I know where I can draw from. And if I draw from a given book, you see me in the course of any one of these sessions pulling up many books and saying, this is what it says, this is what it says. The reason I'm doing that is to help free up some energy in the listener, so that the listener is then able to go out and think about their lives in a different way. I mean, isn't that it? Isn't that what?
Well, one of the interesting things about shadow, and we've talked about this before, Skip, is there's always this negative connotation to it, right. and it doesn't have to be. Now, is it at times? Yes. Are there parts of it? You know, the roots of the shadow reach all the way down to hell. You know, I mean, I know that that's something that Jung said, but you know, there's also a notion, kind of in the spirit of this time, that you know, the shadow is just the part of me that you can't see. You know, that I think that's a phrase that Doshin Roshi talks about. I don't know if you've heard of that guy. He's been on Rebel before. I mean, I like that idea, and that's a very Jungian idea.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Well, you know, we've talked I've thought just earlier about this too in the Red Book, the encounter with the Kabiri, right? You know, the kind of the guts, the sperm, the nastiness. You know, that's where life comes from, right? I mean, it's it's in that breakdown and in that muck, you know, and it's just blind parts of you, right? I mean, it's not, you know, it's just things that you can't see. So not always negative, you know, there certainly doesn't have to be viewed that way.
Wait a minute. I have the page here from The Art of C.G. Jung. Okay, I just want to show it to you. I have to turn off my back virtual background here for a moment, and I can show you the Kabiri. Okay, so here are the Kabiri. And here they are, right? And here's the obelisk. And this is the name of this is called the artfully tied knot. And so the artfully tied knot is actually the brain. Okay, that's the psyche. And here's consciousness with a sword, with discernment, able to cut through the artfully tied knot. That's the point. And he has energy, or, you know, he's got instinct and so on behind him to push him on, but he's having a conversation with these little guys here, the Kabiri. And so anyway, once I understood that's what it was. But the Kabiri are the little guys trying to make you do something that you might not want to do. And one of the issues about the shadow is maybe you don't know what your own shadow is. And so the idea is to try to be able to bring it up.
Just on a practical matter, when people actually do it, it helps so much to either be able to love, that extend love and compassion to that aspect of yourself in the shadow, or to sit with someone like a therapist or a spiritual director who can bring that compassion to that part of you that feels less than, that we're embarrassed about, that we really don't want to go near. It's like magnets, you put them together the wrong way and you just can't get them. We don't want to look at the shadow. It feels awful.
Right, right.
But there is that love and compassion we can bring from ourselves or receive from others that can help us go there.
Yeah. Let's see if I can go cloaked again here. Okay. So the best way to deal with the shadow is to reflect upon it. And there may be parts of it that you can't bring into consciousness, and you have to be able to understand the hints of what it is. But let's go on. All right, people should try to be aware of their shadow. Yes, so if you're aware of it, you can reflect upon it. If you're not aware of it, you can't. That's a very simple thing. And so if you're not aware of it and you don't address it, then you're going to be in trouble because it's going to rule you instead of you ruling it, or you using it for the energy that it brings you. And so, okay, then he says, he further said his psychology is psychology of the heart, and scientific method cannot be used to prove it or understand it. Well, yeah, I mean, his whole oeuvre is about the eros side. It's not about the logos side. And he said that quite explicitly in the first two paragraphs of the Red Book. And just to put that all in one place, I happen to have my Red Book when I need to let somebody in. Who's that? Okay, I don't see anybody, but all right. So let me pull out the first two paragraphs of the Red Book, because it really says why it is that you know, when Jordan Peterson name drops about Jung and makes people believe that he's a Jungian, you know, Paul Vanderklay simply couldn't believe it when I told him that Jordan Peterson wasn't a Jungian. He couldn't believe it because he thought that, you know, he's dropping Jung's name all the time, which he is. But at the same time, he says he's the defender of the logos. But here's what Jung says right at the very beginning of the Red Book, so at the very beginning of his writing career. If I speak of the spirit of this time, I must say no one and nothing can justify what I must proclaim to you. Justification is superfluous to me, since I have no choice, but I must. I have learned that in addition to the spirit of this time, there is still another spirit at work, namely that which rules the depths of everything contemporary. The spirit of this time would like to hear of use and value. I also thought this way, and my humanity still thinks this way. But that other spirit forces me nevertheless to speak beyond justification, use, and meaning. Filled with human pride and blinded by the presumptuous spirit of the times, I long sought to hold that other spirit away from me. But I did not consider that the spirit of the depths from time immemorial and for all the future possesses a greater power than the spirit of this time, who changes with the generations. The spirit of the depths has subjugated all pride and arrogance to the power of judgment. He took away my belief in science. He robbed me of the joy of explaining and ordering things, and he let devotion to the ideals of this time die out in me. He forced me down to the last and simplest things. The spirit of the depths took my understanding and all my knowledge and placed them at the service of the inexplicable and the paradoxical. He robbed me of speech and writing for everything that was not in his service, namely the melting together of sense and nonsense, which produces the supreme meaning. He then goes on to talk about the supreme meaning and what that is in the human psyche. And so he's really about this conjunction between consciousness and energy. And
may I say something?
yeah, go ahead.
Sometimes I have contemplated about consciousness, and this is one image that came to my mind. If people are aware of surface tension that's on the water, it's an invisible force, just like gravity force is invisible. And this surface tension stretches the surface of the water to an extent that a ship can actually float on it. Now, human beings who design the ship, if they actually do not take proper care, the ship surface would be so much and its weight that it can actually pierce the surface tension and fall into the ocean. But I thought that this consciousness is just like a living force that is between the two polarities, which one polarity can say the ocean and the other one, whatever is not ocean, just as the surface tension. And it's independent of both, but it's working in this very thin region, thin invisible region. How close my thoughts to what your life experience might be?
Well, I guess I wouldn't use a ship to explain surface tension, because when we talk about a ship, you're mainly just talking about gravity and weight. Okay, and so in other words, we say a ship has X displacement, number of tons displacement. It means that the vessel that is the ship pushes aside an amount of water that weighs that much. Okay, so a cruise ship that weighs 100,000 tons, okay, 100,000 tons, okay, that's a pretty big ship. That's the size of an aircraft carrier, actually. And we now have cruise ships that are 140 or 150,000 tons, right? But that doesn't have to be to do with surface tension on the water. It has to do with gravity and the vessel. And as the vessel pushes down in the water, it pushes aside that much weight of water. And that's what holds it up, right? And so it's not quite surface tension per se. It's really gravity against, this weight of water is holding the ship up. It's not surface tension. It's the weight of the water that's holding. The weight of the water is actually the thing that's holding the ship up. The water is actually holding the ship up because of the fact that it's displaced. So the water wants to go back to neutral, okay, which means a flat sea, okay, with no waves.
Now it's more understandable, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, water wants to be like this water in this glass, right? It always wants to be flat and smooth. And if it gets pushed aside, it wants to go back into that flat and smooth, right? So I'm not sure where, I don't know if I've even helped you with the analogy.
Another thought I had was like mirror itself. So mirror is independent of what's inside it and outside it, but I thought that consciousness works like a thin screen that's independent of its content, but it's still like it can actually capture the image of reality outside it or around it, but it's independent of it. Obviously, we can break a mirror, but if we can just remove that factor from my metaphor, if a mirror is not breakable but is there, independent of outside world, but still conscious of it or able to reflect the reality.
Able to reflect it.
The reality of the universe.
It actually reflects the opposite of it though, right?
Yeah, mirrored as it mirroring effect.
Right.
We have to be conscious of that.
Yeah, because when I hold my book up,
Yes.
in my view, because I'm looking at a mirror image, in my view, it's backward. Okay,
Yeah.
but I think you can see the words in the right direction, right? But because I use mirror image, because I'm used to looking at myself in mirror image, it's backward. These words are backward to me.
And I find suffering being like one's misperception being corrected by the universe. Because we have a certain expectation, a man-made world, as opposed to God-made world or the natural world. And once our our understanding is skewed, then we might fall from a height, or a car might have an accident, or so on and so on. So I find suffering to be a product of our misperceptions being corrected by the universe to be correct perceptions or valid ones.
Yeah, Edinger talked, and even Jung talked about people having accidents that were their psyche acting out. And I resisted that idea for quite a while, but nowadays I kind of agree. In other words, on the day that I broke my leg, by just doing something stupid, slipping on the ice. And by the way, I realized that in 1944, when Dr. Jung had his heart attack, that was because he had slipped on the ice and broken his leg. and then he was in the hospital having his leg repaired when he had an embolism and almost died. But as I think about it, I think they're probably, as I reflect on it, I think that there was something unconscious in me telling me, don't do this anymore. Okay, this is not where you should be. Okay, now, do I think that that is a puppeteer God causing me to slip on the ice and fall? No, I don't think that. But I do think it is the unconscious, and the unconscious in an uncanny way telling me I should be working on something else, because all the things that have happened to me, and I've had many different successes over my career, but also horrendous failures, but they've all led me right here. Okay. They brought me here to doing this. This is the 178th meeting.
Perhaps mine too. I'm here for the same reason.
Yeah, all of us. Okay. This is the eternal moment, right? All of our ancestors going all the way back have brought us up, and here we are together talking about this stuff. And so why is that? I couldn't say, but okay. All right, so let's look at another point here. Okay, next point. Jung said people initially unconsciously exhibit a certain characteristic he called archetypes. Eve, mother; Helen, lover; Mary, conscious woman; and old wise woman as 4 archetypes for women. But these are all unconscious. After knowing that these were happening to them rather than them doing it, women can become aware and try individuation. He also gave 4 male archetypes of king, hero, magician, and old wise man. Well, okay, people have come up with 1,000 archetypes by now, or probably many more than that. And so what he was trying to express here is the transitions that we go through life. Okay, it doesn't mean it. I mean, the way I think of it is an archetype is like an empty riverbed, right? And you're going to flow through it, and then you're going to flow through the next one, right? So you may be going through the Grand Canyon right now and behaving like a warrior, but then when you get to the end of the canyon, you have to turn back into a calm river again and go into the Los Angeles Reservoir. You know, first you're in the Grand Canyon, and then the water has to go into something else, and that's another archetype. And so we don't, you know, we're not just fitting ourselves to an archetype and then that's it, done, and, you know, been there, done that type thing, you know, because you can develop, depending on personality type too, into all sorts of things. You know, our friend Bill here developed into a novelist and a painter, but he's done many other things in his life, and so you know, and all of us have developed in various ways that we've been pushed by whatever archetype, whatever part of the river we were going through, let's say. Okay, our water is going through the riverbed and putting water into that riverbed, and then the archetype comes alive because it controls the river, right? And so if you're going through that archetype, then you're going to still keep going. You know, Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, keep going, right? Because there can be that archetype too. And
True.
Right. And it certainly happened to me, because when my daughter said, Dad, I think you're going to hell, to me, in that moment, I went into hell, and it took me 10 years to find my way out of it. And
yeah, that's a very tragic story. Each time I hear it, touches me.
Yeah. I mean, I know why she did it. I understand where she was in her life and why it happened. But I had to get my head around what it was and what was happening to me. So, you know, I don't think that we, you know, if somebody, let's say if a young man listening to this, and most of the audience of this channel are young men between 18 and 44, okay? So if a young man is listening to this and he sees these four archetypes, king, hero, magician, and old wise man, okay, well, they're going to say, wow, I'm not a king, and I might not be a hero either. I don't feel much like a hero today. I've been ducking the coronavirus type thing. And wow, I'm certainly not a magician. I can't make things disappear and so on. And am I a wise old man? Well, maybe not, right? So then what? I mean, so the point is that these archetypes are just partial descriptions of where you might be at some point in your life. It's a way of thinking about the idea of transition through your life. Okay, so, you know, so a young man is a warrior, then he becomes a father. Okay, we don't have those here in these four. He becomes a father. You know, then he also becomes maybe a boss in a business, and maybe first a neophyte in a business, and then through a transition, you start at the bottom rung and you work your way through a business, and ultimately you're a boss. And, you know, are you as bad as the bosses that existed in the business when you started? Maybe, you know, because maybe that's where bosses end up.
I'd like to recommend a couple of books.
Yeah, go ahead.
Two that have been very helpful for me are by Jean Shinoda Bolen. I'll put that in the chat.
Right.
Where she brings forth archetypes in the form of the Greek gods and the Greek goddesses.
Right.
So there are gods in every man and goddesses in every woman.
Right.
And what I found in terms of application was, as I studied the goddesses, excuse me, some of the energies of those were repressed due to the way my parents raised me, or the way the culture raised me. Certain aspects of myself had to be denied in order to fit in. And it's very helpful in looking through those books to get a sense of who you really are,
Right.
and to start entering into the energy of some of these things that have not been allowed to be free and expressed through you.
Yeah, I thought those books were terrific. Gods in Every Man and Goddesses in Every Woman. And, you know, basically you can find a primary and a secondary God that sort of describes you. And the ones that describe me are Hephaestus and Hermes, which is Mercury, right? So Hermes is the god that goes down into the underworld, meaning the unconscious, brings things up from the unconscious to the rest of the world. And that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years with my Jungian work, is going down into my own unconscious and saying, yeah, this is how this applies to me. I'm going to pull this up so other people can see it. So that's just sort of a natural way of being for me. And then Hephaestus is Vulcan, who is the guy at the forge who has a broken leg, and he has a gimp, and he's making things, he's building things. And if you look at the Myers-Briggs types, the 16 types, my type, which is INTP, is architect. So I'm always trying to design things and bring things up and structuring them in a way that is meaningful to me, in the hope that it'll be meaningful to everyone else also. And so I got those types out of the books. What did you get, Nancy? You don't have to tell us.
Well, one of the things that I had not realized, Hera, the goddess Hera, is a goddess who deals a lot with systems and works well with men on projects. They can be brothers. There's no interference with the romantic element. It's like she can work as a sister with her brothers. And I had not been aware of that energy in myself. And I think I was when I was younger. But I began to, in a sense, call on that energy when I needed it. For instance, one night I couldn't get my email to work, and I was just frantic over it. And I thought, well, let's see what Hera's energy would be like in this situation. And basically what I got from that was, oh, it's not a problem. We can fix it in the morning, go to bed, it's not a big deal. Whereas my natural self was all worried and frantic about the whole thing. So that was wonderful to be able to shift that energy, just knowing that about Hera. And the other one that I had not realized I represented was Aphrodite, who is very curious and interested in people. And people can get the idea, especially men, that I am personally interested in them as a partner of some kind. And I have to be careful when I am showing interest in someone, and there seems to be perhaps a wrong impression, to say something sideways that lets them know I'm not available. But also Aphrodite enjoys beautiful things. And you can see the screen behind me belonged to my mother. And I don't know if it's Chinese or Japanese, but it has jade and shell, and something like that just thrills me. And I've always been very interested in men and boys from a young age, and had a Christian background, so I didn't get into trouble until I got into college. But that worked itself out. But accepting that about Aphrodite, like Tim Holmes is so free in his soul. He doesn't hold himself back. He's fully expressive. And Aphrodite, that Aphrodite in me had been held back. Society, the church, my parents had all taught me to be very prim and proper, you know.
And then they're forcing things into the shadow, which later are going to pop out.
That's right. And so now, having accepted the Aphrodite in me, then I can rejoice in that.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And not have it pressed down, and I feel freer to be the person I am.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at another one of these, because I think it's very
Hello? Hello?
Yes, yes.
I just wanted to say one thing, because actually Aphrodite is part of my MO.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
And, you know, if you're going to talk about gods and goddesses, actually mine is kind of a funny combination. It's not very masculine at all. I am an INFP, and it's Psyche and Persephone. And the connection to Aphrodite is when Psyche has gone through the various tasks, which in my mind, for a woman or for the feminine, it is those tasks represent overcoming your animus. In other words, you've got to think for yourself. You can no longer be just driven by the inherited, probably spirit of the times would be one way, or a Jungian way of saying it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to develop your own discriminations and opinions, and stand on your own 2 feet, not rely on inherited wisdom or thump a Bible or anything else that's full of rules and regulations. So, but the very last task she has to do, she has to go into the underworld and get some sort of container of beauty from Aphrodite. Now, what's happening there is she's come full circle. She's come all the way around. She's come from being this naive and very innocent maiden, and she has taken her animus and made it her own, or at least developed a relationship in which she becomes part of it. But in the process, she lost something. She lost that innocence. She lost that intuition, that instinct that women are born with. And so she had to go into the underworld, risk everything, and follow, ignore some temptations. And when she came back up to the surface, she had brought those things back with her. Well, of course, in order for her to become aware of the fact that she was in order for her to become aware of her instinctual and feminine nature, she had to be, what do you say? I'm thinking of a car, but she had to be ignited, and that was Eros. Eros came along and said, "Wake up, let's go," and that's a masculine element. But it's masculine. It's kind of an interesting masculine element, because it has to do with relationship and so forth. Anyway, long story short, Aphrodite is sort of a part of what I am and what I do, and that's just, I thought it was kind of interesting.
That's good, Bill. Bill's been promising this novel for as long as I've known him. So it's a long way back now, 178
Well, I tell you the
sessions
truth.
ago.
Yeah, yeah, that's going. Actually, it's turning a corner now. But the other thing is in the whole process of having gone through this Jungian stuff, and also in structuring the novel, and I think I don't agree with Jung on many things. I think first of all, he's too Christian for me. The Christianity part is what made him patriarchal, and by being patriarchal, he left the women out. And for example, if I were to make a case now, but I'm not going to, he says, well, there's this Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Well, there's a Trinity for women too.
Sure.
And if you begin to, and it has nothing to do with males, it has to do with mother, daughter, and other things. Anyway, the other thing is he's, like, for example, when you're reading that thing earlier, you said, the spirit of the depths. Well, to me, that's soul.
Sure.
Why? And it's so confusing to refer to the spirit of the depths and the spirit of the times, when all you got to do for the spirit of the times is say the spirit.
Yeah.
So anyway,
he was trying to avoid getting in trouble with the religious powers that be, though.
Yeah, well, that's a problem for Christians, not for me.
It was a problem for him because he wasn't being honest about what he was talking about, unfortunately.
Yeah, and he was 100 years ago too. So.
That's right, and he was born in 1875. So, okay, there's at least one more that I want.
Same year as my grandmother.
Yeah, my grandfather was shortly after that. Okay, going back here now. It is at individuation that people have fully brought their shadow to their conscious mind and understand their evil or weaknesses and accept them. They also become a full human being as nature intended them to be, not as archetype, but their own full individuality. Okay, I think that these couple of sentences are a bit misleading because first of all, you're never going to get your whole shadow up. And so your shadow, which is also the self, is the boss, okay? And you're not going to be able to get it up fully. I mean, so to suggest that pardon?
You know why? It's because the shadow is the container.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't be in the container and be the container at the same time. You can't be inside the container and be the container at the same time. Well, unless you're enlightened, well beyond means.
Well,
or maybe either an infant or dead.
but I mean, the point is, it seems to me, to be able to recognize the processes going on in oneself. I mean, Jung liked this quote from the Bible, which is 1 John 4:1, to test the spirits to know whether they be of God or not. What he meant by that was, is this something I really want to bring into the physical world or not? Okay. Is this something that, 50 years ago, my grandchildren can point back to their grandfather and say, was this a good thing? Or they can say this was a good thing, but the point is that you have to be able to choose right from wrong. And so what Dr. Jung was emphasizing was, and for those of you who are, let's say, certainly under 25 and probably under 30 as well, don't go jumping off trying to get to your shadow until your ego is fully developed. Okay, and that was a point that Dr. Jung made, which is that if your ego is fully developed, you may not be able to decide between right and wrong. And this is the same type of problem that happens to young men who fall into gangs wherever they fall into them. If your ego isn't fully developed, and there's somebody on the street saying, come on, let's go sell drugs, and you say, oh, okay, your ego isn't strong enough to resist that suggestion, and then you could end up in jail for 10 years. and 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 that wouldn't be a good thing. So what you want to do is you want to develop your ego first so that you can make your own decisions, not make your decision based on what the crowd is doing right now. And then once your ego is strong enough, then you can start working on individuation, which is the balancing of right and wrong, basically, in every dimension, and there are many dimensions. Um, and and so we're all going to be in individuation. It never ends. It's not you get there and that's the end of it. Although tonight I saw a quote um, from a woman who was with Jung 2 days before his death. And 2 days before his death, when he was 85 years old, he had a dream that he came upon an obelisk that was circular. And on it was an inscription that said something like, know this, that this is a symbol of wholeness, or something like that. So Jung achieved what he regarded as wholeness 2 days before his death, when he was 85. And so we have to be kind to ourselves a little bit. We can't expect that this is going to be, oh, I get it, one and done. It's not that simple. And you've got spirits that are pushing you to do things all the time. Okay. And we're watching television, and I don't know, the old number used to be that you'd see 450 advertisements a day. It's probably 1,000 now. How many times have we heard in the last 3 weeks about Black Lives Matter? I mean, it's like a constant harangue. You're being harangued about this particular issue. And in the end, you have to make a decision about what's right and wrong about that. Okay. Just for example, I'll go back more than 50 years to 56 years to 1964. Okay, so I'll even go back to 62. So in 1962, my father took me down to the pier at Yokosuka and showed me a line of ships going out of Tokyo Bay. And he says, you see that, Skip? That's the Marines. They're going to Vietnam. Everybody in the military has either been there, is there now, or is going there. And I said, why, Dad? And he said, because the generals need their medals in order to gain rank. And that sounded like a stupid reason to me. So so here I was 15 years old or something, and I from that moment I knew that the Vietnam War per se was not what it seemed and was not right. Okay, from that moment on. But then in 64, the Gulf of Tonkin incident occurred, or maybe it didn't. It depends on whose history you read. But anyway, it was in the press, and President Johnson announced the end of the marriage deferment for the draft. And it was going to end at midnight on the day that he made the announcement. So there were like 12 hours left on this deferment. And so there were news feeds about people circling courthouses all over the United States trying to get married so that they could be free of being drafted into the military. And that seemed really wrong to me too. I mean, having been brought up in the military, I saw and do see values to what we do in the military, and so it seemed very wrong to me to not want to serve one's country if your country needs you. And so, I was always out of step with my classmates, and and I always kind of felt about the anti-war stuff during the Vietnam time that it seemed like people that just didn't want to go to Vietnam didn't want to put their lives at risk. Well, neither did I want to, but nonetheless, I felt I should do it, and I made a decision to do it. But you have to be able to make these decisions for yourself. And now some of my best friends in the world are guys that didn't serve during Vietnam, and who left the country, that sort of thing. So anyway, we have to make those decisions. Okay, we're losing panelists, so let me look over. Go ahead.
One thing I'll add on and I think you've hit on it, with being good to ourselves. In the Red Book, the encounter with Salome and Elijah, and Elijah clearly represents Jung's thinking and his superior function, and Salome his pleasure, and I mean he harangues her. Like, I mean, I think that's a word Ulanoff uses. Like, I mean, he's awful to her. Mm-hmm. And she, she just keeps on at him for him to love her. And he's like, I can't love you, but he gets there. Right. Mm-hmm. And he's able to accept that part of himself, even though he's never liked it. He's never given into it. Whereas he's given into his thinking function, the more conscious part of himself, he's always given into. But it's that love that, he's able to keep learning, once he's able to encounter that love kind of acted out with the deeper parts of himself. It's almost like it moves him forward in the book almost.
Yeah.
It seems how it occurs.
Yeah, it's fascinating how it occurs. Okay, there's an interesting quote here from Sean Steele. He says, nature creates curved lines while humans create straight lines. That's from Hideki Yukawa. And and it reminds me of when I did have an art exhibition one time, and I did a writing about what was in my art. And so I said, since I never have been able to draw a straight line in my life, I just said, well, even my straight lines, all my straight lines are curved, and even the curved lines are curved, and or something like that. And the point is that your mind, your psyche, is going to see them as either curved or straight lines without mine being perfectly straight type thing. Okay, and not being an architect per se, so I don't have to draw straight lines. And so it just tickles me that Sean gave us that quotation. Good evening, Art. Nice to see you here tonight. Art Patterson is here with us. And let's see. Okay, so Nancy had to leave to rest her eyes. And so thank you, Nancy, for having been with us tonight. Anybody else have any more comments? Unfortunately, I didn't get even close to getting through this list, which I would like to get through at some point. But we can try again next week. Any other thoughts that people want to raise? I hope
the question of killing the hero, like if one wants to live a spiritual life where one's life is fruitful to all humanity around them, they rather not get lost in that archetype of hero where only their own life matters and they have to be successful in their little own world. Rather, at times, even accepting those defeats where with your defeat, you actually do not go to make money, but on that day you stop by and help a neighbor or help a friend or something. So Brendan asked me, what does killing the hero mean? I just wanted to bring that to attention because hero can actually take people to some blind areas in life where a lot of suffering can be caused to them, their close ones, and even the other, whoever the other is.
Right. And you might not live a full life. I mean, I know a few Marines who couldn't get out of the mode. You know, they would be trained and you know, they would come home, and instead of being with their family, they would treat their children like little Marines type thing. and so the idea is that you have to be able to get away from this very rational scientific method world and, you know, smell the daisies a little bit. If you're going to have a full life, you have to enjoy it. So, you know, even I find it difficult because I'm very focused on what I'm trying to do with this effort and the videos that I put on the YouTube channel. And so I find it difficult to break away. I'll be working for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Debbie will come in and say, do you want to go for a walk? And I say, oh, yeah, I should go for a walk and actually feel life, feel nature. And so, you know, I actually force myself to stop, you know, to kill the hero who's trying to do this, and say, okay, yeah, I'm going to take a half an hour or an hour, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to look at the birds and the water, and
I think it's very difficult balance, Skip. And I personally I'm going through a kind of an interesting rut to do with killing the hero, because I have always well, this is how it started. Obviously, with my my parental issues, I always was craving some attention. So I always used to do the Christian heroics, so that I would get some kind of affirmation from somebody for doing some amazing Christian act. I've got over that now. I don't need anyone's support for that. I still sometimes, you know, see people who in a mess and I think I can help them. But I loved so much that woman you had on 10 days ago who said, don't give anybody any help. Don't give anybody any hope. I mean, she was just a fantastic woman.
This is Ann Casement you're talking about?
Yeah, Ann Casement. What a great talk that was. Yeah. But I am now in the same situation of killing the hero or kicking the hero awake. I mean, I don't know, sometimes there's so many things. I haven't done my taxes yet. I haven't, I got 1 or 2 people who owe me money, like the cruise that was cancelled that I was going for from this summer. for my birthday and all kinds of things. These guys owe me money. I'm not pushing them. I'm getting kind of, well, so what? It'll come. I'm not worried about it. Getting very laid back about it. And I'm wondering to what extent I need to engage and be more.
Well, if you're trying to engage, it seems to me you're trying to be the hero. And I mean, that would be my reaction to that. But I was thinking about, when you produced the Messiah last Christmas time in your church, obviously that was a hugely heroic act. When I don't know how many people you had involved, but it was like 100, right?
Correct.
And so 100 people who all have different parts. They're all different types of musicians, or their chorale, and you have to get them all to work together and to follow your lead, and that's a hugely heroic act, right? And so I'm sure you had your mind in it for like 2 months or 3 months before that in order to be able to produce that, if not longer. And that might have been based on having done it before, and therefore having enough experience so you could do it in 3 months. But then what killing the hero means is you have to be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to be able to step away from, I have to step away from my computer screen. You have to step away from conducting and just go do something else that you want to do.
Yeah.
And especially get out into nature, which is, a problem that I don't get out into nature enough.
No, the reason I was late this evening is I just came back from the river. I was sailing for 3 or 4 hours this afternoon.
Oh, good for you.
And so I only just got back.
That's nice.
Yeah, it was Idris. I live on a river, and
which one is it? The Magathie?
The Severn.
Oh, the Severn. Okay.
And so it takes me about 5 minutes to get out there, and it's just a beautiful to be in touch with nature.
I love rivers. One of my practices, like I sit beside the river, especially I try early morning. It's very nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's good. I'm going to look in the index of the Red Book and read also what you're saying about Elijah.
Yeah, that's right at the very beginning.
Okay.
The Elijah part is right at the very beginning of what Jung said. And here, I can actually give you the link or the site probably. Okay, so there's Isaiah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, maybe I'm not thinking of the same thing. Okay, you're thinking of when Elijah comes to him as an act of imagination.
Yeah, that's what you were talking about before, wasn't it?
Well, I was talking about it last week, but what you're talking about is in one of the appendixes. Let me tell you where it is. It's in Appendix B. It's called Mysterium Encounter.
Okay.
And it's about enantiodromia of the life type. So in the reader's edition, it's page 562. Excuse me. But it also refers here to pages 86 to 89. So it must be something in the actual text too, in addition to the appendix. And in the folio edition, according to a note I have here, it is in, if you have the bigger edition, it's pages 368 to 369 and 245 to 248. So anyway, those are the
Thank you.
page numbers where that is. And on the YouTube channel, you can actually find my reading of that part of the book. It's under it's under Mysterium Encounter.
Thank you.
Let's see. Okay, anything else? Okay, anything else, Bill, Idris? We'll come back to this list next week, I guess.
Thank you
No.
very much. I really appreciate it. Was really enlightening, a lot of information. One quick question, because you were on this subject, you can take very short time just so that you don't get delayed too much. But I came across this information that first you have to become Apollo and then you move and become Dionysus. You can never become Dionysus directly. And for that, they were saying that first become successful in life, and then after that start enjoying the merrymaking and drinking wine and poetry and love and dance and all that. Is that a valid way of thinking?
Well, Apollo would be the hero.
Yeah.
You've got to. The hero is what sort of develops the ego.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I would say is you need to develop both sides of life from the beginning. Okay, and so in other words, yes, you need to become a hero in the sense that you have to go out and get whatever advanced degree you're going to get in life, let's say, so that you can be a lawyer, or your advanced degree in architecture, or you name it. That's the hero's journey, right? To achieve those levels so that you get yourself to a certain place where you can support your family and that sort of thing, right? And that's the hero's task. But at the same time, you can't forget the fact that your spiritual side needs help too. You need to be able to get access to that energy. And
definitely.
And so in order to do that, then you should go to the creative side and do something creative. It doesn't matter what it is. But good evening, Lin Xiaojia from Beijing. And there she is. Hello. Welcome. Nice to see you tonight. We're almost wrapped up, however, so I apologize. Is there anything that you would like to talk about before we terminate our session, which we sort of have lost everybody at this point, but I'd be happy to chat with you if you would like to.
Thank you. I feel sorry that I always came at the last minute. I wish I could hear more.
Yeah, the timing is not ideal, especially if you have other responsibilities in your job in Beijing or in your schooling. And I am trying to schedule more events that can be accessible to you folks also. Did you happen to see you can't look at YouTube, right?
No, I can't read any article or the playback.
Oh, that's a pity. Okay, well, what I think that Dr. Shen had found a way around where he could download the YouTube and or download the video that I took when he was there, and I edited it very carefully as well as I could. And so I think he found a way to get it, and then he can then post it on the China side so others can see it in China. I'm hopeful anyway.
Okay, all right. Okay.
I mean, you might want to check with Dr. Shen on that, but it would be nice if that's true. It's a shame that you can't get access to these things. But you know, I don't know what would be a time that would be good for you or others in Beijing where we could have more participants?
That's hard to say.
Hard to say.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, would people come on in the evening, Chinatown or Beijing time?
But the other time are a little bit late. It's late, like midnight. So I wish I could join.
What about if at 9 o'clock or something? If I did something at 9 o'clock in the morning, my time. If I did something at 9 o'clock in the morning, my time would be 9 in the evening, your time.
Yeah, that's possible. Yes.
Okay. I mean, would there be others, or are you aware of others that would be interested in that?
That I need to investigate. I need to do some research.
Or maybe we can also ask Dr. Shen if he would want something like that to happen. Maybe, I don't know how much of a purist he is about educating his students, so he may not.
Right, language would be an issue, and also the difficulty of Jung's books and theories. So.
Yeah. Well, but that's why we're here. I mean, that's why I do this, is to make this information available to average people so that they can see that, geez, there might be something in this material that I should take a look at and try to put my mind around. And I got there sort of over a 3-year period. I got to the point where I thought I should start to look at it more seriously. And that was in 1990. I got to that point, and then I haven't stopped since. So the last 30 years I've been, I just kept studying, and I'm still studying. And so I don't, are you able to buy books from Amazon, for example? Probably not, no.
So all I read is a Chinese version. That's a problem.
Yeah, that is a problem. I think your powers that be are holding your country back when you can't have access to information that everybody else in the world has. It's a sorrowful situation, but anyway, you and I can communicate by email and
all right.
See, I see if we could get enough interest so that it would be worth my while to come on at like 8 or 9 in the morning. I get up at 6 in the morning, so it's no problem for me to do a session that would be Beijing time 8 at night, and something like that might be more accessible to people if there was some interest in that. I'd be happy to do that, because 因为我会说一点中国话。
Oh, yeah.
所以中国是有意思。
很棒。Excellent.
But I haven't I haven't studied Chinese in 50 years, so, but I'd be happy to try to meet some actual Chinese now. Funnily, in I don't know what year it was about 1995, I think. I brought my wife and one daughter to Beijing, and we went to the Great Wall of China, of course. And while we were in the gift shop, there were some old Japanese tourists that were trying to buy something in this gift shop. And so I was translating from Japanese to Chinese and back and forth.
Oh, okay. A Japanese translating for an American in a Chinese shop.
An American translating for Japanese tourists in a Chinese gift shop.
Oh.
Right. So I was only speaking Chinese and Japanese. And my wife is going, what's going on? But anyway, it was fun. It was nothing, we weren't doing Kant or anything like that. We were just talking about numbers and how much the price was for certain objects, but it was fun. So anyway, okay, so I guess we're going to wrap it up for tonight. And thank you for stopping in, though. It's nice to see you. And if you have some thoughts about this, I'm interested in having a small group from China if we can agree on a time that would be useful, right?
So, hi, Yuan. It was good to have you here.
Yeah. So,
hi, Adri. How to pronounce your name? Adris.
Edris, yes, Edris.
Adris. Okay, Adris and Brandon.
Yes, and Professor Lin, I hope you are safe in Beijing. I heard that the virus has come back in some marketplaces. So
yes.
Please be safe.
Thank you. It's hard to say what will happen now in the world.
Yeah, very hard.
Stay safe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so peace.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
I wish the best for all of you. Peace.
Yeah.
Idris too. Thank you.
Maybe see you on Wednesday.
Take care, Brendan. Take care.
Yes. Nice to see you.
Bye-bye.